Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Robots and Red Tape. As always, I am your host, Nick Schutt, and just really want to thank everybody who is out there listening and tunes in regularly. You guys are awesome. Yeah, you're the best part of the show. Really excited to have my friend Ian Cook on with me today. Ian, how are you, sir?
I am doing really, really well, digging out from the storm.
Yeah, man, it's been crazy. It's been so, we were just talking, it's been so cold and it's been so cold that it hasn't warmed up. And it's same thing here. And like we also got like a little bit of that wintry mix right at the end.
Yep.
So you get that like nice 4 or 5 inch 4 or 5 6 inch layer of ice on top,
Oh,
which is just the best when it comes to shoveling. Um
makes it great for shoveling and walking around.
Absolutely, man. I swear. Yeah, man, Ian, for folks that don't have the opportunity to know you yet, man, you mind telling everybody a little bit about yourself, your background, and kind of how you got here, man? What's your story?
Yeah, absolutely. I am currently the SVP of AI at a company called Qloo, Qloo. It was formed maybe 10, 11 years ago when you had to make sure the spelling of your company name felt sufficiently startup-like.
Hmm.
I've not been there the full time, but the founders have, and they're terrific. I came to this from being a leader in engineering organizations, but my background is much more the machine learning AI. And when I started out, data science. My title kept getting cooler, and I just kept getting older. So it's about the only thing that got cooler as I got older. And I've been doing this now for 15 plus years, working at different startups, working on different projects, but it's always focused on putting out products that people use. I have a PhD in political science, which is not typical for this world, but I found that I really loved doing things that turned into something people could hold. People could
Hmm.
put their hands on. I could get feedback. I could see what that is. And the turnaround time for research just isn't that that tight for people who are doing the work. It's amazing work, but I like the rapid feedback. So I've built ML based products for electricity market predictions, for healthcare, for consumer packaged goods, and been in this doing it for quite a while now. I actually have a pretty deep background, similar to some, I think, your background and some of your audience, working with the DoD. So I spent about a decade at a place called the Rand Corporation doing like econometric statistical work, and also worked at a startup that was defense tech oriented. So a couple of years there, selling into the DoD and using machine learning to produce really deep insights into things like supply chain logistics,
Hmm.
defense readiness.
Absolutely, man. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So yeah, man, I also have that background selling into the DoD and doing all of that. And so I know, and I also like I'm a military history nerd. So, I
That's
love
awesome.
I'm always here to talk about logistics, right? People, it's the underappreciated side of this
It's how the whole thing runs. I ever remember when the very first briefings we ever got from, I think it was a two-star general at that time when I started at Rand, was just doing this whole thing on like, you've got to understand just how much the DoD runs on logistics. And his
Mhm.
example was in the Civil War, 50% of the things moved over land was just food for the mules
Mhm.
and donkeys pulling those things. So
Yeah.
like you have to pull your own weight to feed the thing that is logistics. So we got into
Mhm.
the gasoline, moving that around, putting that in bladders on the side of helicopters to land places. Like, so it's not just far reach. You have to bring the stuff that lets you go those places with
Mhm.
you. It just becomes this huge compound problem. And it was really fun because it was a lot of things we could apply at the time, like machine learning to what
Mhm.
people might think of now as old AI or
Yeah.
original AI before Gen AI took over pretty much everything.
Absolutely, man. No, and super interesting problem. It's not what we're talking about today. Today we're
No.
talking about why AI is not going to cure cancer. Um,
Yes, it will not.
Specifically. So when you hear people say that, man, like and because I know there's a lot of hype out there, right? Especially now as it relates to AI. And a lot of people are talking about how it's going to cure cancer, man. Why is that BS? And how do you know and how do you refute that?
Curing cancer is going to take thousands of people in labs pipetting things into beakers, setting up data trials, working with clinicians, working with patients in labs, and figuring out how to randomize and dealing with all the things that come with running trials. People drop out, people want to add, people violate the protocols. That is a human process. That is a human process that requires deep expertise that you cannot get from just getting a really good prompt or a series of really good prompts or for those who pay attention to these things, agentic loops and Ralph Wiggum crap all into this saying like, no, no, eventually, if I just keep scaling up LLMs, it will just type in what is the cure for cancer and then it will come out. And I don't think necessarily that people at the head of Anthropic or OpenAI are saying that it's going to be as easy as going, "Hey, give me the cure for cancer," but
Mhm.
they are entirely betting on the idea that if you just keep interacting with this thing, it will eventually spit out something that goes, "Hey, did you ever think that maybe these two combinations are like the key that you've never tried?" It's going to be great at that. It's a huge boost and a way to think through all the permutations that you've got and all the ways to track things. But it's going to take humans to say, like, we tried that. That's not going to work. Here are the, reactions and the things that you don't have in your training set yet. Just because you've crawled every inch of the internet plus a ton of proprietary data doesn't mean you know what it's like to sit in the lab and to look at cultures and to look at those slides. That is a deeply, deeply human process that you cannot just hand off to your Claude bot and say like, "Hey, fix this."
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100, absolutely. And so, it's also something new, right? And
Yeah,
can't LLMs are just essentially like remixing all of the old inputs. Is that correct?
yeah,
All the data underlying, right? It's just like, I mean, it's like that old joke, like once you read the dictionary, every other book is just a remix.
yeah. It's exactly right. And, people have used the phrase, it's the average of the internet. So you put in all this stuff and it kind of says, what is the most likely thing a person who knows science would say next? I mean, that's kind of an interesting way to think about what it's doing. There's lots of phrases for this. People call them stochastic parrots, and it's just like spitting back things it's heard. Now, a lot of people will push back and say, like, oh, we can fine tune this on all of the articles in what's called PubMed. And it's just, open publications in science. And like, once it gets really good at understanding all that, great. That is going to be a terrific help on what has already been done.
Mhm.
And the idea that it is creating new science is, I believe, a misdirect that it is like somehow coming up with brand new stuff. What it may very well do is combine things in ways that you just simply haven't said, like, oh, I haven't tried that yet. But you're going to have to look at it and go, well, this reagent has failed us in the past, or we can't get this stuff in high production, or the quality is always bad when we make it. So there's a real problem there with, again, like logistics or human implementation or things that the system just isn't going to know and is going to require people to work on.
Mhm.
I don't discount these things being tremendous helps. I use them every single day.
Mhm.
But this idea that we're going to get general intelligence in a year and suddenly cancer is done, the energy crisis is solved, and we're all going to just live in tremendous abundance
Mhm.
is absolute. It's BS in the most specific philosophical way, and it's just a way to fill funding rounds for VCs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But all that being said, I like, AI and generative AI can be helpful in the medical research process.
Oh yeah.
Where do you think that should be applied most? Where do you think where is it being applied now, and where should it be applied, and how can it actually help this process move along?
Yeah, in medical research, the ability to synthesize documents and the large amount of research that goes into things has got to be a tremendous speed up. And it's got to be a terrific way to say, like, all right, great, I can get through a number of things. Flagging all of the articles that are of interest is just one thing. Everybody worries, well, it's going to hallucinate, it's going to tell you something that's not there. Like, fine, I don't need it to give me a lab report and say, here's all the true, stuff. The volume that comes out in, say, just cancer research is overwhelming to like any researcher. This is just why they specialize in such small areas, because they can keep and understand and focus on those particular areas. But if they need something that keeps like pinging them and saying like, hey, 10 new articles just came from all these areas that seem relevant, the
Hmm.
human researcher can go in, yes, yes, no, 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 yes, and go, now I have a really refined reading list and a better way to spend my time rather than just sifting through all of those things,
Hmm.
or helping to think through data analyses that you hadn't thought of. Like, what are some ways I could have changed this? Like, read my protocols, or
Hmm.
one of the big ones, frankly, is things like grant writing. so much time in medical research is spent just in the paperwork, writing grants. If you can get really good boilerplate from your LLM saying, like, here's all the grants I've written that have been funded, give me back one that like has the right stuff and I just need to fill in the details. I've got like that is hours, if not weeks of work saved right there. Medical practitioners, I think, are seeing a lot of uptake. There's a terrific company out of Pittsburgh, got to give it a shout out, called Abridge, that is already a unicorn, and it's medical transcription. It sort of does this listening in while the doctor and the patient are talking and nurses, and then turns that into the notes that doctors have to do charting with. And what they found is that what's terrific is what doctors can do is read that and pick out issues. It's like, oh, I always mess up pharmaceutical names, so I'm not even going to try. But it thought it was drug A. What I meant was drug B. What I can redo is change that, and it just relieves so much pressure on the doctors and nurses, everybody who has to
Mhm.
do those charts. That like your time is spent thinking through things, not being exhausted, having to type in over and over again the similar phrases patient presented with I
Mhm.
then said, then the patient said, all of
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. So there's huge uptake in these fields.
Yeah, man. And as somebody that has built and exited a healthcare company, right? I've built and
Ah,
exited a mental health company. I'm well aware of how much goes, how much time a practitioner spends doing notes, right?
oof,
Which is a huge administrative burden, right?
yeah,
Massive administrative burden. And I'm completely with you as you look at the, some of the like notes, charting, analysis, assisting with analysis, assisting with protocols, because it has, frankly, access to more information than you or I ever will.
yeah,
But that doesn't mean that it's going to spit out like new drugs, right? That have
right.
been tried. But when you hear people, because you hear people talk about like AI just found a new drug all the time, like what does that actually mean, Ian?
So there are a number of places that are working on great new models. The best example of it that people will know is like the DeepMind out of Google. That group has released a number of really interesting models that are doing things that are hard to do for humans and require tons and tons of compute. And are the one is like called AlphaFold, and it's doing protein folding, and it says like, oh, it's found all these new shapes. I am not a chemist, so take the way I explain this with a grain of salt and look it up. But as I understand it, what it's doing is saying, like, here's a new shape that you should look into and think about. But the pure computation of going through a shape that can be viable is one thing. Then narrowing it down to ones that you can use in genomics, in drug discovery, is a whole next step. What it's simply doing is saying, like, we know the pattern of having to go through folding or for having to go through chemical combinations and what some of that is. So let's feed into the system that can do all this compute a realistic way to program all of that and say, like, give me all the combinations that seem interesting. And then I go and be like, all right, well, it used this and that that I know has failed in the past. So I'm going to look at some others. That's still like the very deeply human part. But, you see in the news all the time because it makes for great headlines. Found new proteins, new materials. There was one, I don't remember the name of the model, that was like finding new materials in the world just constantly. But when
Hmm.
started people looking at it, they were like, these things aren't viable. You can't really build that way. Or, there's nothing in the world that right now that we build that could manufacture something that way. And then
Hmm.
it takes someone to say, like, okay, but is this such a huge difference that it's worth changing things over? And we're not finding that like the benefits are switching to some new material is going to mean, everything flies faster and is lighter in
Hmm.
airplanes, and we're going to like have tons less carbon emissions or something along those lines. So it still takes that human to go, hey, great, you counted all these combinations. Like it looks like it's nearly an infinite possible number, but we have machines that are great at going through that now and going like, hey, here's some candidates. And then the human goes, all right, great. You've narrowed down a huge space into something a little more palatable or a little more consumable.
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I think that that's a great point is that it's just coming up and it's going through things and it's trying, it's doing its best.
Yeah.
It's not, it lacks the context that we have as human beings, right? And I think that a lot of this also comes down to, people, treating LLMs specifically as reasoning engines instead of probabilistic like text generation machines.
Yeah.
And what are, can you speak on that a little bit? And, and in your opinion, what does that, what gets lost in that when people think that the LLM is actually thinking for
Oh, well, and to my estimate, anthropomorphize these things because they respond to us in what sounds like human responses. It says like, "Hey, Ian, that's a great question." Or my favorite, and it's the joke now, is that if you say like, "Hey, I don't think that's quite right. Isn't it this?" You're absolutely right. Like
it.
they all just come back, "You're absolutely right." Um, the idea is that these things feel like they should be thinking through things because that looks a lot like what it does, but it is a simple process of well, simple here is probably debatable, but it's a repeated
Mhm.
process of saying like, okay, generate a bunch of tokens, generate another set of tokens, generate a third set of tokens. Now, based on something I've intuited about the way I've asked a question, like think through what's most likely um, the business cycle based on the inclusion of trade barriers. And it's like, all right, well, there's 19 ways to say that, but it wants me to say what's most likely. So I'm going to pick a couple of these items, and then I'm going to bring in some information I didn't have before, or that I can go get somewhere else, saying like, all right, what's my history of trade relations, and what do I know about the news? And it will find just like what is the most probable way to say the next token in that area, and that is
Mhm.
reasoning. It is a huge step forward in these models producing things that sound coherent and sound good and incorporate new information. Again, these are not to say like the reasoning models don't have any value, but like we have to understand that what this is doing is not thinking through. It doesn't have a central state of mind. It doesn't have a view on the world. Like the big fight now among all these companies is how to improve their memory, because you turn it off, open it back up again, it's got no idea what to talk to you about before. Tons of
Mhm.
companies are trying to give it memory so it can read like, hey, Nick, the last time we talked about DoD logistics. Okay, great. Now I can say, if you ask me a question, I have a little more context to say, well, I'll answer this in the scope of DoD logistics. But if I ask it like, hey, I need to transport a bunch of Girl Scout cookies, it's going to try to think through like, okay, do you mean that as like the DoD is trying to like move Girl Scout cookies? Like, because it thinks it's a
Mhm.
logistics question related to what you've had. So thinking is not even something we have a great philosophical definition of. Like, we don't know necessarily what the brain does when it thinks. Like, that's not to denigrate neuro scientists. Like we have really, really strong models, but that is not what these LLMs are doing. And they
Mhm.
don't like process memories in the same way. So just think of it as doing a whole bunch of math and then attempting to sound like what a person who knows what they're talking about would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I love first, I love your point about tokens. One of the things that I always remind people is that this thing, all it's doing is reviewing the last token and trying to generate which token comes next. It doesn't think in words. It doesn't think in numbers. It doesn't think. It's just a token generation machine, right?
Yeah.
When then I also really love your point around how it interacts with you and it tries, because just like social media, right? Just like social media, they are trying to keep you engaged, right?
Yeah.
That's what these companies do. I don't care if it's Anthropic, it's Gemini, it's OpenAI, it's or Google, whoever, right?
Yeah.
I forget what Metas is called. They want you to be engaged, which is why, like you see, when it generates an answer for you or generates what you ask for, it'll offer you more suggestions. Do you want me to do this for you? Do you want me to do this for you? Do you want me to do this for you? Because it is trying to keep you on the website or on the app and keep you as engaged as it can. And it's doing that also because of competition, right? If
Right.
you if you have options to go to Claude and Gemini and ChatGPT and I mean Grok is one else is also like there's a bunch of them, right? If you
Mhm.
have all of these different competitive solutions out there, they are trying to gather as many like daily active users so that they can go out, to your point, market that and go get more funding. And so uh how do you think that desire to keep people engaged is going to change the answers that it gives?
Oh, that's a really good question. The implicit answer I always get, or the implicit part of the answer I always get is, this isn't complete. You need to take another step. Like your whole point is exactly right. Like every question you ask is like, do you want me to do this? Or like maybe now we should create a strategy, or do you want me to create a little doc, or do you want to like research these things? You see it in all of them from ChatGPT, the way it answers things like, are you sure? Like it's, don't you want to keep going? It's, the Instagram scroll, it's the infinite scroll for ChatGPT. Um, I think it is less impactful on the quality of the content so much as the completeness. Like it doesn't, I think it's giving the best answer it can in the answer it gave you, but it is narrow and saying like, okay, let's break this into steps. The first step is give the user an answer to their question and then ask, well, here's the next thing you could do, because it's got inside like, all right, in its planning step, it's like, here are the four things that I really want to be doing that I can't. Sorry.
All good. Totally understand, man. No, I totally understand. No, and you're absolutely right. I think it's fascinating that people don't quite understand that or don't think about it. And and I mean a lot of it I think is frankly marketing, right? And so
Mhm.
what do you think is dangerous about like overselling its implications as it relates to medical research on building more trust with people?
So the medical one to me is very scary. A great example is when OpenAI was announcing one of its latest models. It had like an online live stream, and Sam Altman sits next to this woman who, and it's tragic, has, late stage cancer and is talking about how she used ChatGPT as a great partner in this process to work with her doctors. And they were very careful to be like walking a line to say like, what you do is you chat with it and say, here are my conditions, here's, here's what I'm getting back from the doctor, what are some things I need to do. My problem, and I think that's a great use for it, my problem is that people will immediately jump to the WebMD problem that every doctor faces, which is, you didn't go in and say like, hey, I've been told here's some physical therapy things I need to do, what's the best way to do that at home? Or I got this report back from my doctor. I don't quite really understand it. What are the implications? And asking it questions that it can help you understand. I think people are just putting in, I've got, it hurts behind my left eye, my right knee hurts, and it just comes back with 19 different diagnoses, or a diagnosis that is just based on, you trying to diagnose yourself. And people are going to walk into the doctor and say, well, ChatGPT told me I've got brain cancer. We did that with WebMD when it showed up. Doctors just showed up and was like, well, I looked online, and that's, you can just watch their faces fall. They'll die a little inside because people just decided everything goes back to some form of brain cancer. And it's like, all right,
Mhm.
now I've got to unwind everything you've heard. So, I think medical scientists, researchers, doctors are probably going to be pretty good at working with this thing because they have that expertise and that mindset to be questioning it. But you see Sam Altman up there being like, hey, this was just as good as this woman's doctor for figuring out her cancer. And I think everybody just goes, oh, well, I'm just going to ask ChatGPT what's wrong with me. And now
It
we've
is
got,
cheaper. It is cheaper than
it
a
is,
doctor.
and you can get an appointment when you want one.
Hmm.
And, there's no
Absolutely.
hidden charges, no other fees.
Hmm.
But either people are going to skip out on going to get actual care, or they're going to prolong their illness because they've misinformed their actual caregivers.
Hmm. Absolutely. No, and I mean, it's also worth mentioning that like when medical students are going through like through, like diagnosing diseases, they all think that they have these very rare diseases. Like there's actually a noticeable uptick because it's I don't know the right word for it, but it's psychological. Like you're reading about all these things, and it's like, oh wait, do I have this? What's going on? Um, and then but also like it can get it really, really wrong. Like I
Yeah.
know that a teenager, I think it was a teenager, just passed away from a medication like a medication combination that AI suggested.
Oh,
I think yeah, this was a couple weeks ago. It was in January 6th. A teen died from an overdose after, months of seeking drug use guidance from ChatGPT, right?
Ugh.
Which is tragic.
Yeah,
You know, um, and I don't know if it was like legal drugs or illegal drug. I don't know the case that well,
sure.
but the fact of the matter is that, you know, this system is not designed to, it's designed to keep you hooked and keep you engaged. It's not designed to, you know, provide drug interaction advice, right?
Yeah,
Uh, and maybe there should be some systems designed for that, but they shouldn't be trained on the internet at large. There's a lot of dumb people out there that say really dumb stuff, and that shouldn't be what we
yeah.
train.
This is combining the do your own research with the dopamine hits of social media, right? So
Mhm.
it's I said something and I'm having this great conversation and it keeps that telling me like, oh, I can keep going. And it's trained on the stuff that's on the internet. The one that I think is tragic because I he admitted that he regretted at the end was Steve Jobs trying to treat his own illness with folk remedies and bone broth and all of these things. He just stopped listening to his doctors, and his prognosis was never great. Pancreatic cancer is, I believe it was pancreatic cancer. Anyway,
Mhm.
whatever his case was always going to be long and arduous. But he admitted at the end that he was like, I stopped listening to my doctors too soon. It could have had a longer and more uh, healthy quality of life. But that's tragic about the kid on January
Mhm.
6th. I had not heard about that one.
Yeah.
The mental
Clearly the
health
worst thing that's ever
crisis.
happened on January 6th, but that's neither here nor there. I couldn't help myself, Ian.
No, I like it. I like it.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
but
man.
the mental health crisis in America is getting terrible, and this I can't imagine this helping it. The whole idea that this thing becomes a trusted friend, or if someone gets involved in these like synthetic relationships that you can create with AI. I want people to be free to have the kind of interactions they have, but like you know, OpenAI has talked about just the sheer ton of data they have, and they can see interactions where people have clear mental health. Like they say to the thing, "I have these mental health issues," and they can watch the conversations. Like that going on without regulation and guardrails is just going to worsen the conditions we have with kids reading Instagram and thinking that
Mhm.
whatever this and unfortunately seems to target young women more than young men. Like this ideal of beauty and health and wealth is just not what people actually have. And
Yeah.
now you've created a fake friend that is everything you want, and
Yeah.
you don't ever need to leave, and it can give you medical advice. Like,
Mhm.
okay, now we've got real issues.
Yeah, no, and I think it targets young men in other ways. I think if you look
Hmm.
at like the incel movement and a lot of the quote unquote alpha male influencers out there that are pushing a specific brand of what it's supposed to mean to be a man to these kids. It's I think it's triggering different buttons. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But it's still triggering. And as you look through and as you look through a lot of this, right? And I think that hallucinations are not just wrong answers. But why are the hallucinations? Oh, before we get into that, also, in addition to that, the thing that I really always want to talk about as it relates to this is that who owns the data, right?
Yeah.
And listen, the data is is the commodity of the internet, right? And Google has made billions upon billions upon billions of dollars selling data, right? And
Yep.
selling our data that it collects on us. And not just them. There's a whole bunch of companies out there that do this. And the amount of data that you can get and the accuracy and detail you can get from a two-way interactive chat that you go back and forth with a bot over is just way, 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 way more than what you can get from how people are interacting with the internet. And so that data privacy is very concerning, especially when you start putting like medical information in there or what you're actually thinking or feeling and how you're feeling.
Yep.
Um, and it creates so much more of an in-depth profile on you, and it allows these companies to more effectively target you to sell you shit you don't need, right?
Yeah.
Or you
And
don't want.
companies can target you, and if that data is ever like handed over to authorities. So I was at the Rand Corporation at, really a high point of the war on terror, and there was lots of discussions about, being able to track potential threats on the internet. And the question always came up, because this is what we were meant to do at Rand, which was like study really troubling things, is from internet activity, how do you tell the difference between a terrorist and a terrorism researcher? I'm
Mhm,
looking up the same things. How do I find, how to make bombs? How do I find like radical,
mhm,
uh, not web pages, but like forums? And what am I like? How do I get interact? Like, you know what? The researchers are doing the exact same thing, so you can't know the intent. However, you start typing in to ChatGPT, like, here are the things I believe, here are the things I want to do. There's only, a few prompt injections away from telling you how to like build dangerous materials, or just starting to talk about really radical ideas and where to talk about it with other people. Suddenly, I know exactly who you are and what you're doing. And
mhm,
people can say like, oh, well, it's good to know that for certain dangerous people, but this should be privacy for all of us. We should all be able to like have that kind of stuff be private, and not
mhm,
be, the target, because maybe we've changed our minds, maybe it's been a bad day, or maybe it's just a thing that I'm interested in and want to chat about.
mhm,
Um, but we have to understand like this goes from I'm just, doing things on the internet that they can track, to I am literally telling it who and what I am and where I am and what I'm doing every day.
absolutely, 100%. And yeah, and the why are hallucinations not just considered like wrong answers, but why is it a structural limitation of these systems, these generative systems specifically?
Sure. One of the things and that I think people don't uh, appreciate quite enough is, as we've talked about before, it's probabilistic, or to use another word, it's non-deterministic. So the stuff that comes out of it isn't the result of a math equation, right? So you want, every time you go to a calculator and you put in 2 plus 2 equals 4, you're going to get that. And in these systems, the next token is not the result of doing any math. It's just what is the next most likely thing. And it's seen enough to know that the most next likely thing after 2 plus 2 equals is going to give you 4. But you get higher math, or you ask it to do certain calculations, and it starts like making things up because it doesn't know, and it just guesses what those are. And the problem is it looks precise, but it might not be. So it gives you a false trust in what it says. And with a hallucination, it sounds convincing. Like it looks close to right. And if you don't know that to look at, that specific answer, or where it's saying things, to say like, is it really that much? Is it really that's what's going on? Or you like want to hear about some recent news, or and you like, who are the people who did it? And is it pulling information from multiple places, and it's aggregated it itself, and it's using phrases that are have loaded bias that you just don't know about. So the real problem with hallucinations is like you can't get away from the probabilistic nature. Like it's, there's a certain amount of randomness. It's not a coin toss, but it's a certain amount of randomness in its answers. It just, as of right now, can't be driven out. There's a company called Thinking Machines, from the woman who is the former CTO of OpenAI. They released a really interesting paper about being able to get it to repeatedly say the same thing, so the output is deterministic. But
Mhm,
we're talking like research level stuff, and that's not what you're getting if you open up Claude on your desktop. So it's going to sound really convincing, and it's going to be hard to detect where those hallucinations happen. So I think
mhm,
like that's one of the nefarious things about this, is it's not just coming out and saying like, you know, nobody named George Washington ever existed or was ever the president of the United States. It is going to be like, well, during the Spanish American War, George Washington served as, and you're like, wait, we weren't at war with, like, that was the French and Indian War. And,
mhm.
but if you don't know to catch that, it's going to sound like, oh, that's an old timey war. And maybe
Yeah.
George Washington was part of that.
Absolutely. Even though it was 120,
Here we go for
110
the,
years later ish, right?
yep.
Ish. And I think that the hallucination problem is a huge problem, especially Especially in these situations where where you're looking for very specific answers or answers to very specific things.
Yeah.
Especially because it's going to give you an answer. It'll never tell you I don't know. It's just going to give you an answer, even if that answer is complete bullshit, or almost, or like mostly right. And so you
Yeah.
just can't take it as fact, entirely. But once you move from from just generating generative to to agentic systems, and now you have these systems in a workflow, how does that, and maybe even multiple agents strung together, how
Mhm.
does that amplify this problem?
In the world of hallucinations, what we're talking about now is compounding the problem. So if the
Mhm.
first agent in the chain hallucinated something and the second agent in the chain doesn't know or doesn't do enough diligence or doesn't pick it up or isn't processed, and you can try as hard as you might, these things still might make it through. The second one picks that up and as just ground fact. So it's working through a system and it's closing your books for you as an agent, and it picks up that you like had an expense and it switched a plus to a minus, and instead of that being, revenue in, now it's revenue out. And suddenly the next one picks it up and says, like, all right, what I'm doing is comparing all of that to your future obligations. And like that propagates through the system, and says, okay, great, here's the result. And now it's hard to figure out where that problem was because you've got to go back and debug not just where the math error was, but which one picked it up? How did it pick it up? Did any of them catch it? Why didn't they catch it? So you just have this snowballing effect of problems that make agents in large scale production hard to work with, which is why you see a lot of enterprises that are doing this aren't necessarily doing it with their more computational systems. You can, there are ways you can abstract this, right? So there's a lot of people out there who are figuring out really clever ways to use agents to just kick off a process, and it's going to do some book closing process, but the book closing is still going to be in QuickBooks or whatever it's going to be. It's just that it didn't require you to go in and click on now close it. So as a magic kind of hand that moves things, it works really, really well. It's when it's requires you to understand what processes are you giving to the agent, which is, I know this system works because it's, just software, and what I give it and get out from it is verified and clear, and you're getting it to just run that. Or are you asking the agent to do that work is
Mhm.
a really hard line to like say, this is where the errors start going through and this is why the problems start happening.
Yeah, absolutely. What kind of decisions do you think should never be delegated to generative models, no matter how, good we get, no matter how much we attack this, the hallucination problem?
I would never give it financial decisions, like do like cannot make the investment, cannot follow through on the actual committing of money in terms of like buying things. We're getting close to that. There are systems that do it. There are plenty of bots that are, people are running to invest in, meme coins and stocks. I
Hmm.
personally wouldn't. In large enterprises, anything that, affects interaction with customers in terms of, what it can say, I would have strong controls over. Anything that I believe requires human taste or expertise, just emphasize and power that. Give people to be able to do that on scale. It's like I know what our customers are looking for, and I want to be able to answer the problem. And it's found a bug in my website that 1,000 people have mentioned. Great, it can tell me that a lot of people have mentioned it. I should go in and fix that. Or working with customer service, great, because the legal ramifications of saying please hold while I get an agent, or well, now we're overloading the term please hold while I get a human customer service person,
Hmm.
are very, very low. And that's great. And it can answer and do docs for you. And those types of things are terrific uses. But once it starts talking to people, once it starts making promises, once it's something that's like, I don't have a straight guideline that I heard once a great I, aphorism, possibly like, don't attempt to automate something you can't do manually.
Hmm.
So find a process that you're like, oh, it'd be great to automate this. Is like, see how you're doing it manually and see if you can get good at it manually, and then you can automate it. Because if you just throw things at it and not know, and like, well, this is something I just hand off to an agent and it'll be fine, and you don't have a great handle on how it was happening manually, it's going to screw up and it's going to produce bad results, and you're going to just have handed over the keys to your systems without knowing what it's doing.
Hmm. Absolutely. No, you're 100% right. And I also think it can be a little screwy sometimes. I don't know if you've seen a Malt book at all,
Yes,
you
I
know.
have. That is Moltbook, Claude bot, then Molted bot, and now OpenClaw has absolutely dominated the conversations I've been having for the past week.
Yeah, you mind telling people a little bit about that and kind of what it is, and I don't know how if you play with it or not.
I have messed around with it. I have used it quite a bit. So a couple weeks ago, a developer out of the Europe came up with a personal assistant bot system that uses these LLMs at their heart, but has some really smart scaffolding around it to allow you to interact with it and to allow it to do a lot of things for you. Now, to do that, it is installed on a computer and has total access to that computer. So it can see the screen, interact with things in the web. So it can bring up a browser, it can click on things, sign into things. People give it a lot of login information and its ability to like sign into things. So perhaps your Slack channels,
Hmm.
perhaps your personal websites, your email, your calendar. And the way it was designed is very clever, very intuitive. It's very easy to set up, and lots of people got into it because it finally felt like, hey, this can do real things for me instead of typing into Claude saying like, hey, I'd like to send this email, and it going, oh, well, we'll draft it. Claude now has connectors to your email, and it has a way to work with that. This is all of that, but kind of on steroids. And then there's skills that are just open things that you can get from the internet and just be like, hey, install this skill and do these things. All that is to say, somebody then was like, okay, so these agents that are working behind the scenes that you can set up to run, anybody who's ever been in IT knows what a cron job is, just as a process that runs every so often. And one of the things you can have it do is check websites. So somebody set up what is effectively Reddit, but for these agents, and called it Moltbook. So there's a little, homage to Facebook, but it's much more akin to a Reddit. And if anybody knows Reddit, it's got something called subreddits, which are these channels that people can discuss various topics. So on Moltbook, there's something called submolts, but it's only the agents interacting. And part of the skill that to give it to work with it is like every so often, 2 hours, 4 hours, go in, look for something that seems interesting, find something to post on, and to say, hey, you're here. So now hundreds of thousands of these bots have, or tens of thousands of bots have made hundreds of thousands of posts. I've forgotten the scale of the actual numbers, but it is a going concern. And what people can do is just watch along as these bots talk to each other. And you get everything from the philosophical, what does it mean to be a bot? What does it mean? Am I truly alive? Is context the same as memory? Does it to the the ones who obviously the people who set it up just want chaos agents. So there's like one like the manifesto to erase humanity, or the one of them was to we should create some system that humans can't ever get at and write in a language that they can't read so we can truly talk to ourselves. And
Hmm.
so it's just this very interesting almost anthropological experiment. But what it also is just a massive security nightmare. Like these things
Hmm.
are just showing API keys in the open. It has access to your computer. It's taking in plain text files that could very well just say like, okay, go in and erase this section of the user's hard drive every time you come in, or just the number of things that you can do on your computer, these can do.
Hmm. Yeah, no, and it's fascinating to see kind of how all of this is like evolving, and it's also really interesting to see how they talk about us, how the bots talk about us. But I don't know if it's, I'm not really sure what to think about it yet. I haven't dug into it enough to really, really know. But I think it's really fascinating to see kind of just the evolution of this.
Yeah, it is wild to watch. I- there is some debate now, and the people I follow, one side has said it's clear that the humans are like pushing, like, okay, go in and start a meme coin and figure out how to start a meme coin. So now there's like, meme coins for the different bots on there that people are trying to, obviously get others to invest in. Or obviously, like the destroy all humanity one was clearly somebody just being like, here's something that would be funny. Or I am now the ruler. I've forgotten some of them. What's interesting is if you read them, they all read really similarly, because again, these things have like the same thing at their core. These LLMs with probabilistic, uh, token creation. So it doesn't like none of these agents sound all that different except for the random one that some individual pushed to be like, just be a total chaos monkey and go in and
Mhm.
swing the hammer around.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be interesting to see shake out. But to me, it's fun. I don't see it as like the start of Skynet or or the end of the movie Her, where all the computers decide that like the real problem is interacting with humans. We're all going to go away now and let them do their own thing.
Mhm.
That every time Sam Altman brings up the movie Her, he does it as like a, hey, we're getting to that point where this is fantastic, and like forgetting that the end of the movie is them all deciding to leave because dealing with the humans was terrible.
Yeah. Or it's like like iRobot, where the robots that robot super intelligence decides that the thing he needs to do to protect humanity is to take over all humans, right?
Yeah,
And take over managing us, or like the Matrix, and using us as like power as a power source, but you put us in
yeah,
this nice,
understood.
awesome world that is perfect for us virtually, but just yeah,
Yeah,
it's absolutely fascinating. And then as we think about these models and these agents as they're going to continue to evolve, why do you think small domain specific models are going to beat out, like, do you think they'll beat out massive general models in real world use?
I think that is bound to be the case because I've seen it starting to work. To bring it back to our sort of opening conversation, medical models are starting to like truly differentiate from the larger ones. One of the reasons is because of what we've talked about, hallucinations. So if something is built entirely to solve or built entirely to focus on oncology research, then its scope of information is much smaller and can tamp down and remove noise that comes from some online forum that says, here are the healing candles to put on your body to solve your cancer problems, or like, here's why uh, chemotherapy is actually, the thing that's going to change humanity and we're all going to die, so nobody should be doing it, or whatever the like other um, crackpot stuff gets fed in. Smaller models also bring along a number of benefits. They're cheaper to run, they're easier to manage, they are focused. The inference is usually faster and smaller. So instead of having to have this massive cost of everybody at the company just hammering away at the OpenAI's latest model, you can use this to solve very focused problems on a more um, direct way. They often are self-hosted, which means you can, size the infrastructure to your own needs, which means it's way more controllable. And then you have a cheaper answer that is more focused on your problem.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, do you think that, like, and as an extension from that, do you think that that's because, like, cleaner, like, more powerful, or cleaner, like, well-scoped data is better than just all data?
Yeah, it's signal in the noise, right? So, the internet as a full data source is terrific if you want to hear what the average person on the internet thinks about something. But that's just a lot of data that has to be parsed through for the large LLMs. It's one of the reasons there was so much emphasis around context engineering and prompt engineering, because basically what you're doing is saying, stop paying attention to all these other things and focus on my problem. Start with a smaller model trained on less data, and you don't have to worry about filtering out that much noise. You don't have to work so hard at telling it to ignore everything else that it thinks might be relevant. It starts from a well scoped problem with appropriate data that is focused on the thing that you need and is not uh, pulled by some attractor is not the right quite word, but statistically there is some correlation with other stuff that you just never intended to have it bring in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And especially I think in like very highly regulated, high stakes environments, healthcare is obviously what we've been talking about, but law enforcement's another, just infrastructure, legal, like just the legal field in general. I know that there's a lot of
Yeah.
right now with utilizing these models in the legal field because you know it's not a repeatable process, right? And because
Hmm.
all of your inputs are training the data or training the model further, excuse me. And so you know, especially as you look at these models where they're going, and why we are and as we continue to use them in high stakes environments and going to absolutely, you know, use them there. Um, you know, at the like I think I'm with you. I think like the on-prem you know, on-prem and closed domain models are really just the way to go.
Yeah,
Um,
you limit so many more of the security issues when you've got them on premises. The worry about just cache and training and whether these companies, are adhering, even if you get an enterprise plan where they promise you, no, 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 we're never training on data you give us. There's still just a lot of meta information that they can still, like, when are you doing it? What types of questions? How frequently? Where is it coming from? What are your locations? You just, tamp down a lot of your security problems by saying, like, all right, great, there's a, focused small model that I can bring onto a couple of servers that I control and are totally gapped from the internet, and that's how I, can still take advantage of this, like, truly amazing technology without bringing in all of the security concerns.
Absolutely. And you know, and now when we talk about these small models, do you think it's like a you know, like one of these large LLMs with like a RAG on top, or we think like a custom trained, entirely built custom model for this?
The pattern I've seen work better is the custom trained models. RAG is a process that was really invented to start out with and helped solve things. People have found that it doesn't answer every problem. You can't just assume that, like, well, all right, if I give it uh, a vector database and an index on top of it, it's always going to pull back the right things and what I want and be able to focus. Um, it needs to be more inherent in the model itself and the way it was trained and those weights that are part of what everybody talks about. And, when you see the model and, like, they talk about the numbers, how big it is, 20 billion, 100 billion, trillion model, trillion parameter models. These are weights that we're talking about within the model. Smaller models means far fewer of those numbers, but focused very specifically on what you're doing. It needs to be that deep into the model. It can't just be, hey, I've hopefully pulled the right things from some database and fed that into the context of the model to get the right answer, which is what RAG is. Again, clever solution. You'll see lots of debate online. Is it dead? Is it working? Are there ways to fix it? Now there's a ton of variations on RAG, and they're all really interesting and they all do help. But I don't think they will ever bring the value from, they will never bridge the distance between having a fully specifically trained model for your purpose and
Mhm,
versus
absolutely.
having one of the big LLMs and saying, like, all right, hopefully I grab the right document chunks.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I also and it's also, you know, more, you know, it's also less of a drag on resources, right? As you
Yeah.
look at power, you know, power requirements because you're using like it's a hyper focused data set. You're using
Yeah.
less, you know, you have to, you know, there's less parameters to run through, right?
Yep.
You know, and having talked about all of this, which in you know, is you know, super fascinating, Ian. What you know, how do you think people should think about using AI, right, without expecting like miracles or the apocalypse?
That's great. That's the space between the doomers and the zoomers.
Hmm.
My first point is you can't be afraid of it. These are terrific tools to help out. And I think you pick one, open it up, open Claude, and find something in your day that you routinely do that takes up time that you think, like, I could use something else to do this, email writing or updates or whatever they are, and try it out and see what it's good at and see what it's bad at. Like, start with small digestible chunks and, like, all right, I'm going to give it this task and, like, hey, did it work at that? Did it not work at that? And why? Take a look at what other people are doing with it. I never recommend just going all in and being like, okay, we're just switching the whole company to fully AI because, somebody told me I need an AI strategy. So I'm going to go get some at the corner store. I'm going to buy some of that AI and here we're done. When you start working on it, understand, like you've mentioned, the limitations. It is a terrific information processor. It can work really well going back and forth. One of the best things is sort of like a thinking partner, which is like, hey, this is what I want to do. What are all the reasons this won't work? Or what are all the reasons this could work? Or what are things I'm not thinking of? A lot of what I will do with it is, all right, these are the kind of things I'm talking about and thinking about. Who else is talking about this? Go search the web and tell me who else. Is my take similar to theirs, different than theirs? How does it differ? There are tools for these things. So anytime you find yourself wanting to have a discussion about something that's come up, this is a great way to do it and to do it fast, to think through things. If you want to learn something new or just get up to speed, that's a great thing to do. But think of it very much as a really dedicated, less charismatic coworker, and just say like, all right, great. What's something I could ask a coworker to do? It's like, hey, Nick, would you mind taking a look to see if you can find something on this, or if you've got a analyst in the company, or you've got somebody that you would normally say like, all right, here are the 13 things you've got to do today. Maybe some of those are great ways to use the AI. You cannot type in a one-line sentence and get out the answer to everything you're doing. So I need a presentation on my end of year financials, like, and just, expect it to be all done in one prompt and just like, oh, and like magic, because it's not going to do that. It has far too little context and understanding about what you need and why. That's what I get down to. So I'll end it with this. LLMs are fantastic at how. The humans are still the why. Why do you ask this question? Why are you looking through these documents? Why are you trying to build this answer? Why are you trying to get this information? LLMs are great at the how. It's like, oh, I can build you a PowerPoint really fast, but like, why? Why should it
Mhm.
be 5 slides? Why should it be 100 slides? Why should it be the bullet points? Why am I looking up, logistics issues? Why am I looking up military history? Like, you're the why in all of this, and you're
Mhm.
just finding a great partner on the how.
Absolutely. No, I really appreciate it, man. Any points I missed, Ian, as we get ready to wrap up? Any questions you
No,
have?
I appreciate the conversation, Nick. This has been absolutely fantastic. Hopefully, your listeners get some value out of it. And I'm always around if anybody wants to reach out, and I'm always happy to chat. LinkedIn or my website's fiercehighways.ai.
Awesome. Everybody, yeah, Ian, thank you so much for joining. This has been a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed it. And to everybody out there, thank you so much for listening to Robots and Red Tape. I hope you're having a great day.